Many people think turning 60 means decline, a quiet step into the shadows of life. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed that this age marks the beginning of something profound, a turning point where the soul itself begins to awaken to a deeper truth. What if 60 is not the end of your journey, but the moment your soul finally begins to reveal its truth? Think about it. For decades, you have lived a life shaped by responsibilities, ambitions, and expectations. The need to build, to achieve, to raise a family, to prove yourself in the eyes of society. Those years carry their own meaning, yet Jung recognized that they do not tell the whole story of who you are. At 60, the balance shifts. The outward struggle begins to quiet down, and an inner calling grows louder, almost as if the soul has been waiting patiently for this exact moment to speak. And in that voice, you do not hear the echo of decline, but the whisper of authenticity. In this video, we will step into Jung's understanding of this remarkable phase of life and explore why reaching 60 is not a closing chapter, but rather the opening of an entirely new one. You will see how the soul, after years of silence, begins its journey toward wholeness, guiding you to embrace meaning rather than distraction, truth rather than illusion, and wisdom rather than fear. This is not about abstract philosophy, but about a lived experience, one that every man and woman who reaches this stage will feel in their own way. By the end of our time together, you will discover how to view this milestone not as something to dread, but as a rare invitation to grow deeper into yourself. You will leave with a clearer understanding of what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation and the second half of life, and with insights that may help you embrace this passage with a sense of peace, dignity, and strength. So let us begin this journey together, and allow Jung's wisdom to illuminate why 60 is not the decline of life, but the profound moment where your soul finally begins to tell you the truth it has been holding all along. When Carl Jung spoke of the human journey, he often emphasized that life is not one straight path, but rather a series of stages, each with its own psychological task. By the time a person reaches 60, they have usually spent decades living according to external demands, the expectations of family, the pressures of career, the drive for recognition, the responsibilities that come with building a life in the world. These are not meaningless pursuits. They are necessary, even noble in their own way. But Jung noticed that as we move into the later chapters of life, something begins to shift. The outer world, once so demanding and consuming, no longer holds the same weight, and a quieter, more persistent voice from within begins to make itself known. This is where Jung introduced the concept of individuation, the process by which a person moves beyond the masks and roles they have worn in society to encounter their true self, the self that has always existed beneath the surface. Individuation is not about abandoning one's past, nor is it a rejection of family or achievement. Rather, it is about integration, bringing together all the fragmented parts of the psyche and allowing the deeper essence of the soul to finally take its place at the center of one's life. Before 60, most people are preoccupied with survival and success, striving to create a stable foundation. After 60, however, the question changes. It is no longer, how do I prove myself, but what truly matters now? The man who once measured his worth in promotions begins to sense that fulfillment lies elsewhere. The woman who once defined herself through the roles of mother or partner begins to feel the stirrings of an identity beyond those labels. Jung saw this shift not as a crisis, though it can feel unsettling, but as a natural and even essential turning point. For him, 60 was not a decline, but the beginning of an entirely new phase, one that calls the individual inward, toward truth, meaning, and wisdom. This is the stage where we are invited to face our shadows, to accept the contradictions within us, and to reconcile the unlived aspects of our being. The fears and desires that were once buried beneath ambition rise to the surface, asking for acknowledgement. And though this can feel like disorientation, Jung believed it was a doorway into wholeness. To reach 60 is to be given permission to stop performing and start listening, to step away from the noise of expectations and hear the quieter rhythm of the soul. This process may feel like loss to those who cling to the identities of the past, but for those willing to embrace it, it becomes liberation. Jung described it as a spiritual maturation, a flowering of the self that could not occur in the earlier decades, when survival and growth demanded so much outward attention. He believed that the second half of life carries its own purpose, one that is just as vital as the first. Where the first half is about expansion, conquest, and creation, the second half is about depth, reflection, and authenticity. At 60, life is not ending, it is revealing. The soul, having waited patiently through the storms and struggles of earlier years, finally steps forward to guide us toward meaning. This is not an accident of age, but a profound psychological truth. The psyche is built to ripen, to evolve, to transform. The beauty of Jung's insight is that it frees us from fear. Instead of seeing 60 as the threshold of decline, we can see it as the threshold of awakening, a moment when life ceases to be about what the world demands and begins to be about what the soul desires. And in this recognition lies not despair, but the quiet joy of realizing that the journey is far from over. It is only now becoming truly your own. Reaching 60 is not just a psychological turning point in Jung's view. It is also a practical invitation to reshape how you live each day. And this begins with the courage to redefine yourself. For so long, identity may have been tied to external roles: parent, professional, provider, achiever. But Jung reminds us that these roles, while meaningful, are not the whole story. At this stage, you are asked to look inward and ask honestly, who am I when the titles fall away? To redefine yourself is to bring life into alignment with your deepest values, to let go of identities that no longer serve you, and embrace the truth of who you are becoming. This naturally leads to the second task, focusing on meaning. Instead of asking how much more you can accumulate, the question becomes, what really matters to me now? It may be the quiet joy of creating, the peace of nurturing a garden, the depth of sharing wisdom with others, or simply the freedom to live without pretense. Meaning is not found in what society prescribes, but in what the soul longs for when given space to speak. Yet, to move forward with clarity, one must also come to terms with the past. Jung believed that no life is free of mistakes, regrets, or unfulfilled desires. But rather than seeing these as scars to be hidden, they must be embraced as part of the larger whole. The process of individuation requires integrating the shadow, accepting that what once seemed like failure or weakness is in fact woven into the richness of the self. To forgive oneself, to accept one's story without denial or bitterness, is a profound act of maturity. And once the past is reconciled, relationships too can be transformed. In youth, connections often serve needs for validation, ambition, or security. But in the later years, they can become deeper, freer of superficial motives. To nurture relationships that are honest, supportive, and soulful is to create a circle of authenticity, where love and understanding replace competition and pretense. Beyond relationships with others, lies the relationship with spirit itself. Jung saw this stage of life as a time when the individual naturally turns toward the spiritual dimension, not necessarily in the sense of religion, but in the broader sense of connecting to something greater than the ego. This may mean cultivating practices of reflection, silence, or meditation, or simply allowing oneself to feel part of the vast rhythm of existence. Through this openness, wisdom emerges, not as abstract knowledge, but as a lived awareness that everything has its place, and that the soul has always been guiding the journey. Jung called this the discovery of the inner wisdom that matures only with time, a wisdom that is not available in youth because it requires the depth of lived experience. To embrace this stage is to realize that the true task of life after 60 is not to fight against age, but to embody the wholeness that age makes possible. It is to live with fewer masks, more truth, and a deeper sense of peace. This is not decline, but ripening, not an end, but the revelation of what has been waiting patiently within you all along. In the end, we come to see that turning 60 is not the end of the road, but the beginning of a deeper journey. The moment when the soul finally steps forward to guide us toward truth. For decades, life may have been about striving, achieving, and fulfilling expectations. Yet Jung reminds us that the second half of life is not meant for endless struggle, but for uncovering the essence of who we are. Your soul has waited 60 years to show you who you truly are. Now, it's time to listen. This stage is not a burden nor a decline, but an invitation to embrace wisdom, meaning, and authenticity in ways that were not possible before. It is a call to shift from fear of aging to gratitude for the clarity that comes only with time. As you reflect on your own journey, consider what truths are now ready to reveal themselves, what relationships are ready to deepen, and what parts of yourself are ready to finally be acknowledged. Do not see 60 as a closing door, but as an opening into a richer, more meaningful existence. The years ahead are not less. They can, in fact, hold more depth, more peace, and more truth than any that came before.